Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today I'm bringing you a look at another of the exciting new decks from Fates Collide. We've looked at Alakazam, we've looked at Delphox, but now it's time to look at Genesect EX. And this is an especially lucky Pokemon, because since being introduced as a legendary, this is the second EX we've had, and the Grass EX for a long time was combined with Virizion EX to give a, well, for a time, the best deck in the format. I think it was 2013. It took something like 3 of the top 4 slots or something ridiculous. It was everywhere. And now he's back with this Metal EX. So let's have a look. He's got an ability Drive Change. Once during your turn, you may put a Pokemon tool card attached to this Pokemon into your hand. And this is fine, it's not going to see a huge amount of use, but it's got a nice utility. As an example, you put a muscle band on him, you can do 20 extra damage. What's that? He's stuck in the active. Well, that's okay, because you can take away the muscle band, and then you can attach a float stone, because of course we have this rule, 1 Pokemon tool per Pokemon. Want another example? We're going to talk about Zoroark briefly. Zoroark, you want to have a float stone on because he's got that stand-in ability, and then you can free retreat with float stone so you can switch your active Pokemon. So early in the game you might have a float stone in your hand with a Professor Sycamore. You don't want to discard the float stone, you put it on a Genesect, and then you can later take the float stone off of Genesect to put it onto Zoroark. Not the best ability ever, but one that's worth a bit of use here and there. But the reason we really like Genesect, and this has seen a little bit of success in Japanese tournaments lately, Rapid Blaster. Free metal energy, 100 damage, not particularly great. But you can discard as many metal energy attached to Genesect as you like. Every one you discard gives you 20 more damage. So let's say you've got a Genesect with a muscle band and free energy. You discard all 3 of those energy and you do 180 damage. 100 base, plus 60 for the free energy, plus 20 for the muscle band, 180, which of course is enough to KO as many EXs as you like. Now, the thing is that you can basically have an unlimited damage cap with this Pokemon, but it can take a little while. It can take a lot of energies to do all of that damage, shall we say. So, how do we get the damage on, the energy on? Well, the main Pokemon we're looking at here is Bronzong. Now, Bronzong is his most obvious and, to my mind, best partner. This is the Bronzong from Phantom Forces with the Metal Links ability. And it allows you to take a metal energy from your discard pile and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon. Now, this is where the Zoroark comes in handy, because if you have got a Genesect in the active, you cannot attach an energy using Metal Links. So Zoroark jumps into the active with a float stone, and then Genesect goes to the bench, you reattach using Bronzong, and then you can free retreat the Zoroark. Sounds like a good plan. Now, we're looking for free energy per turn, plus a muscle band on the Genesect, so if you get 2 Bronzong out, you're rolling here, because you can have 2 energy from 2 Bronzong, and of course your 1 allowed energy attachment from your hand per turn. Sounds like a nice little combo, and this is generally how it works. You use Bronzong to get the energy on Genesect, and then you just discard and do a bunch of damage. Now, one other option for getting the energy onto Genesect, and this is not something I would highly recommend, is Max Elixir. Look at the top 6 cards of your deck, find a basic energy you find there, and attach to one of your basic benched Pokemon. You can use this to get energy on Genesect, but it's really not all that. If you play about 12 basic energy, you'll probably hit with 3 or 4 of the 4 that you can play, but it's just clunky, and I don't know if you'll have room for it with the Bronzong. Bronzong is a better option, although one thing we are going to talk about later on is ability lock, so I suppose Max Elixir can give an element of protection from that. Just so we're clear, not a huge fan in this particular deck. Want some more cards? How about a couple of Bronzongs? We have Bronzong Break. Now, the thing I like about Bronzong Break is that you're going to be playing Bronzong anyway. So you might as well put a break or 2 in your deck, because It's just one or two extra little cards. And it's got the attack Metal Rain. Discard as many metal energy attached to this Pokemon as you like. For each energy card discarded, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and do 30 damage to it. So you can discard one energy and do 30 damage to one bench Pokemon. Or you can discard 2 energy and do 30 to each of 2 bench Pokemon. Or you can discard 2 energy and do 60 to 1 benched Pokemon. And so on and so forth. This is a nice little utility attacker. Again, if you're running Bronzongs to attach energy anyway, putting in 1 or 2 Bronzong break as a nice little extra attacker can work. Doing this 4 times can actually KO a Shaymin EX on the bench for 2 prizes. Doing it once can discard something like a Joltik. His resistance will not help him when he's on the bench. Or discarding 2 could KO lots of evolving basics. I don't know, something like a Gibble, for instance. Or a Froakie, which is actually playable. You see where I'm going with this. It's not your main attacker, but it is a very nice extra attacker. We've also got, and most decks are going to want to play 3 of the Metal Link Bronzongs. And the reason is Metal Fortress Bronzong. He good, ladies and gentlemen. He good. Prevent all effects of your opponent's attacks, including damage done to your bench Pokemon. Now, the damage is nice. Stopping bench damage is good. But it's all effects of attacks, including damage done to your bench Pokemon that we like. Now, it means that they can't put special conditions on your bench Pokemon, but when does that happen? The really good thing I like about this is that it gives protection from Trevenant Break. Trevenant Break's attack, Silent Fear, places damage counters. It doesn't do damage, which means it is an effect of an attack other than damage. You know what that means, ladies and gentlemen? It means that Trevenant Break drops 3 damage counters on the active and does nothing else. This is awesome. There is a Bronzong from Breakpoint, but it sucks. So let's not put any time into this. I suppose you can use Pain Amplifier to combo with the Bronzong Break, but it's so underwhelming, I'm not even going to explain it. Maybe that makes me a terrible person. Now, there are a couple of Pokemon I really like in this deck. One of them is, these are other attackers other than Genesect and Bronzong. Now, you've got to remember that space will be a premium, but there are a couple I like. One of them is Heatran. 3 energy, steel drop, 40 damage, 80 if there's a stadium in play. Let's face it, there's always going to be a stadium in play. 130 damage, Steam Blast, 2 metal and a double colourless, and you discard an energy to do so. Why is this good? It's a non-EX attacker. Now, it can't go up to the huge damage that Bronzong and Genesect EX can, but it's a non-EX attacker. It's a basic attacker, so you don't have to go through all the time evolving, and you don't have to give up 2 prizes when he's KO'd. If you can get a KO or 2 with Heatran during the game, that's going to really help, because otherwise you could end up being overly reliant on an EX Pokemon. The other attacker I really like in this deck is Aegislash-EX, and the reason is he's got a beautiful ability, which is called Mighty Shield. And it prevents all damage done to this Pokemon from each of your opponent's Pokemon that has special energy attached to it. Now, don't get me wrong, the attack Shield Blast isn't terrible, it's just not particularly good. What is more important is that ability. You come against something like a Vespiquen Vileplume deck that only plays 4 double colourless energy, and Aegislash will be a wall that basically wins you the game. It's a very good inclusion as a one-off or something like that, just because it's really, really good at blocking these Pokemon that have special energy. Especially something like Vespiquen Vileplume, which won't play VS Seeker, so cannot use Hex Maniac very often at all. Now, there are a couple other attackers which I'm going to mention very, very briefly. I'm not a huge fan of any of these, though I do understand that they can have utility in some decks. So we start off with Dialga EX from Phantom Forces, and the attack we're really looking at here is Full Metal Impact. 150 damage for 4 energy, but the brilliant thing here is that you do not have to discard all of them, only 2. Pop a muscle band on him, he's hitting for 170, that's enough to KO any non-EX and the most of the relevant EXs, and you do so without having to discard all your energy. So you can put a double colourless and 2 metal on Dialga, and then you discard the 2 metal, but you keep the double colourless. And this is really, really nice. It's just a way of conserving your energy a little bit. Bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that Dialga, Bronzong and Aegislash have not been a powerhouse deck, though they've all been out for a while. I am counting on Genesect here as being the difference in metal decks. I think he's going to be the one that makes them great again, if anybody can. So although I'm okay with Dialga as an extra little attacker, he's not the best one here. Let me be clear about that. We have Drudigan, and he's alright. I quite like him. Now, one of the reasons I like Drudigan is because he's not reliant on metal energy. Revenge for a double colourless energy does 90 damage if you had a Pokemon knocked out by damage, i.e. not by placing damage counters and not by poison or burn or confusion. Although I suppose burn would be actually knocked out between turns rather than during your opponent's previous turn. But you know where I'm going with this. 90 damage. This is really good against something like Night March. If Night March are using Hex Maniac to turn off your Bronzongs, then Drudigan come in and get some revenge attacks to KO these pesky Pokemon for a double colourless energy. And obviously if you're using cards like Drudigan, like Zoroark, like Dialga, you're going to want to play double colourless energy here. I'm quite a fan of using just metal energy so that you can go ahead and recover them using Bronzong. The other Pokemon which I suppose could be mentioned here is Jirachi. I like Jirachi, the promo, because he can get rid of double colourless energy and he can go ahead and give himself immunity the following turn. He's kind of cool, I suppose. I quite like him. The other thing is that being a metal Pokemon, he can take advantage of the metal stuff we're going to talk about in a moment. I suppose if you're also playing DCE, you may wish to play Seismitoad. It will help your Night March matchup greatly using that Quaking Punch. It's a fun little card to include. It can help matchups. Like I say, something like Night March that's so reliant on these trainers, it can be helpful. Now, in terms of metal support, there isn't very much. There is Shield Energy, the energy that reduces damage done by 10 to the Pokemon to whom it is attached. The problem with Shield Energy is it's not seen a lot of play. We've seen a lot of these type-specific special energies, and the only ones that have really seen play are Strong Energy and, to a lesser extent, Mystery Energy and Flash Energy. They've got to be darn good to see a lot of play, and honestly, Shield Energy isn't that amazing. It's alright, but the other thing is, of course, that Shield Energy cannot be used with Bronzong, and that's a little bit of a problem. Bronzong allows you to attach a Metal Energy from your discard pile, and Shield Energy does not count as a metal Pokemon until it is attached. While it's in a discard pile, it doesn't count. It's also potentially discarded by Jirachi or Zoroark or Enhanced Hammer. I'm not a huge fan. We've also got 2 stadiums. First of all, we've got Steel Shelter, which removes and prevents special conditions from each of metal Pokemon on the field. Now, in the expanded format, where Hypnotoxic Laser is a thing, this is quite good. In the current format, special conditions aren't that great. I suppose cards like Excelgor in Expanded with the automatic paralysis can also be a pain. Steel Shelter helps. Now, what might be a better option in the standard format, X and Y on, is Reverse Valley. Now, this is one of these stadiums which can be used either way round. We are interested in the way where our side of the field reduces damage done to metal Pokemon by 10 damage. This is quite nice. This does the same thing as Shield Energy, but is much lower risk and is kind of cool. So I like Reverse Valley. I'm not a huge fan of shield energy. In terms of Steel Shelter versus Reverse Valley, it really comes down to, are you expecting special conditions? If you are, Steel Shelter's your boy. If not, bit of Reverse Valley can be fun. So let's finish off talking about some of the problems with this deck. We've talked about the Pokemon to use. Let's talk about the problems. First of all, and this is by far the biggest problem with the deck, this is, it's all about ability lock. Now, Hex Maniac, a supporter card that turns off abilities, not a huge amount of fun. Similarly, we've got Garbodor, which doesn't see a huge amount of play at the moment, but is always there. And that's not particularly good in terms of turning off your abilities. It's annoying, shall we say. Now, one thing which can be a pain, depending on your build and what you have in play, is Greninja. Greninja's Shadow Stitching attack stops abilities of all Pokemon in play on your side of the field or in the discard, etc. But let's not forget the Fates Collide Bronzong, which, as well as stopping Trevenant Break, prevents all effects of your opponent's attacks, including damage done to your bench Pokemon. So Greninja's Shadow Stitching, which should turn off the abilities of your Bronzong, doesn't, because turning off the ability of Bronzong is an effect on your bench Pokemon. And Metal Fortress from Bronzong turns off Shadow Stitching's effect on your Metal Lynx Bronzong and allows you to use them. So actually, and this is something maybe I should have mentioned in my Alakazam video, that Shadow Stitching can just completely screw over your deck, that does not happen to Bronzong. Now, your entire deck is weak to fire, but Entei and Delphox aren't great right now, so it's not a huge problem. The other big problem is the setup. You've got a whole bunch of Stage 1 Pokemon, and, you've got your Bronzong, maybe your Zoroark, and you've got your Genesect. It's not a deck that just rolls. This isn't Night March, where you discard a whole bunch of Pokemon into your discard pile and then attach with one energy attachment on a basic Pokemon. This is, let's get a whole bunch of Stage 1s out and then be attacking. It's not the easiest deck to set up. It can have some problems in that regard. There is also a potential problem if you're using an EX-heavy deck, trying to trade against decks with Night March and Vespiquen, these good non-EX decks. But then again, you can use things like Bronzong and Heatran here, or Bronzong Break and Heatran, to really try and even this up a little bit. It's not the end of the world. The big problems here are ability lock, but not Greninja, and being able to set up nicely. So you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen, there is a comment section. Let me know what you thought about this video. Let me know what you think about Genesect and Metal Pokemon in general. Click that like button, click it, click it, click it, click it, click it. Have you clicked it yet? Thank you. And click that subscribe button if you haven't done so, and get a friend to subscribe on your behalf if you have. We're coming up to 3,500. This makes me happy. But you know, ladies and gentlemen, I am hungry for more. Until we hit 100,000, I will be wanting more. And to be honest, even when we hit 100,000, I'm then just going to be looking forward to 200,000. I'm a horrible person. What can you say? The most important thing, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.